Welcome to your Partner in Success Radio. I'm Denise Griffitts, and today we're diving into a topic most people don't think about until it's just too late: driver's education. Honestly, when I started talking with her before in our pre interview, I had never thought of it either, probably because I've been driving for quite a while now. But we're not talking about just how to pass a test, but how to create safe, confident drivers and the real challenges behind the system. So, before I introduce my guest, I do want to mention something that's been a really helpful resource for business owners and entrepreneurs listening to this show. My Preferred Partner program gives you visibility with this audience for a full year. It's a way to stay on top of mind without having to chase ads or posts. And you can check it out at yourpartnerinsuccessradio.com and go to the Partner with Us tab. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you really thought about driver's education? As I mentioned, not in a very long time. And not just learning how to pass a test, but what it actually takes to create safe, confident drivers in a world filled with distractions, mobile phones, overcrowded systems, and not nearly enough resources. Because here's the reality: traffic related injuries and fatalities are rising, and most of it comes down to distraction, as I mentioned, lack of proper training, and systems that simply just don't keep up anymore. So, what happens when someone steps in and decides to fix it? My guest today, Cheryl Price, is doing exactly that. Today, we're talking about what she calls the jungle of driver's education: the challenges, the gaps, and the opportunities. We will also explore what it takes to build a scalable, mission driven business in an industry that truly matters. So, if you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, or a parent, this conversation is going to give you a lot to think about. Cheryl, good morning and welcome to your Partner in Success Radio. It's good to have you here.
Good morning, Denise, and thank you so much. It is my pleasure to be here today.
Thank you. Well, tell us a bit about you and how you like to show up in the world. I mean, you have a business for franchising. You do a lot. I was reading when I was reading the notes you sent me, I went, okay, I'm tired just watching everything she does.
Yeah, so I do show up for a lot, and I am a very mission driven and purpose driven individual. So we've all had things that we've done in our lives that have brought us joy in one way or another, whether we've done that personally or professionally. And I can honestly say I have been part of this industry now for just over a year, and this is the most fulfilled I feel like I've ever been professionally, because I'm doing something that really matters. And everything that I'm doing individually, that I'm helping the team do on a broader scale, is really having a true impact. So when I think about showing up, Denise, it really is who I'm showing up for. And in business, when we're networking and we're talking with other folks or potential customers, we always keep in the back of our mind, what is our why? Because not every day is easy, and every day comes with its challenges. But you have to remember, like, through those challenges, why am I doing this? So that keeps me motivated every day, especially in this industry where there are some things that are around the corner that we didn't anticipate. But today I'll hopefully talk about how to mitigate some of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And you describe driver's education as a jungle. And now that I
Mhm.
think back, yeah, you've got scared kids in there. You've got probably terrified driver education people in that car 'cause I don't know what those kids are gonna do. What's really going on behind the scenes that most people just don't see?
You are so right. You hit the nail on the head. So you have parents that really just don't know how to navigate this. When I was learning to drive, and this was many, many years ago, just like a lot of some of our listeners might be thinking back to this as well, this was not an industry in the same way that it is now. And I think on the state level, a lot of departments of transportation and departments of motor vehicles have realized, like, we need some more regulations around this. And they're constantly changing things, but it's a lot for parents to keep up with. So they're navigating through that jungle, right? So we're showing up being their experts and helping them find, the best path to what is best for their child. But then you have the other element of the child themselves. So what we're seeing in this industry, which really surprised me when I began to start and do my research and everything, is how many kids are waiting until they're older to get their driver's license. And a lot of that is just fear. They see a lot more, they're exposed to a lot more. Social media, they just see a lot more of the bad things that are happening out there on the road. So I think a lot of them are like, you know what? I can wait. And, mom and dad are struggling because they're like, "Well, you really can't because, we're driving you around and doing all this stuff, but, it becomes taxing sometimes for a family that's got multiple children." So there's a lot of things going on. And at the end of the day, this is your child and this is their safety. And there's just a really big emotional component that a lot of folks aren't thinking of. And so, a lot of what I want to talk about today is that emotional component and kind of how we're taking the industry and changing direction and making it more mission based. So, we're showing up for those families and we're helping them navigate those fears. But kind of a funny thing that you mentioned is, the fear that's happening on the instructor side. And yes, I've been behind the wheel many times with a child learning to drive. And sure, there's a little bit of fear there, for anyone who's ever taught anyone how to drive, you could probably empathize with that. But at the end of the day, it's also so extremely rewarding to see these kids go, "Oh my gosh, I never thought I'd get that. I never thought I'd be able to do that." I had one child tell me, with an explicitive that I won't won't repeat. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. I have my hands on the wheel of this car and I'm making it go. So there's something about that again, we come back to our why are we doing this? And it kind of cancels out all of that fear of noise or that noise of fear, I should say.
Well, that makes sense, and I'll tell you one thing that worries me just as an adult is seeing a teenager with a car full of small children. That just doesn't seem right to me. That I hate to see it.
Yeah.
I really do. Not that I can, tell people, don't do that," but you don't know what's going to happen. Unexperienced drivers with, bouncing around in the back seat, sugar-laden kids, not a good
Mhm.
idea.
I agree completely, Denise. And so a lot of states have what is called a graduated licensing program. So there's different stages of licensure that the kids go through. So even when they do finally pass their driving exam and they're considered independent on the road, there are still restrictions in place for a certain number of months or even years in some cases. So there are restrictions the state has noticed that hey, kids are more distracted when their peers are in the car or anyone else under the age of
Oh,
18
yeah.
for that matter. So they're saying, hey, you can't do this. And if you get caught, that might mean that, you don't get to drive for another 6 months. So they're really starting to crack down on that.
And the whole thing about 18-year-olds, I remember being one, and I was about as arrogant as they came. We all
Oh,
are.
sure.
We're little sociopaths. Don't let anybody change your mind about that. We're
Yes.
arrogant, we think we're bulletproof, and we're going to speed. We're going to, do whatever the heck we want. Most of us are just not that responsible. So I like the idea of the staggered, you can do this, you can't you do that again, you're gonna get smacked. I like that.
Yeah. And you're so right. The immortality, I guess, is what I've honed in on, and I remember you're absolutely right, I remember starting to drive and kind of thinking, "None of that's ever gonna happen to me," and hopefully, no one ever has to experience that and kind of learn that mistake the hard way, but part of our curriculum, we're real with kids, we're as real as we can get because they need to understand that, it's very rare for any person that it's a matter of if and not when. So the best thing that we can do is just prepare them for reality and say, if you do this, it will happen.
Right. And when I learned my lesson, I was about 20, I think, and I was not a great driver. I just wasn't. I was, not really paying attention. My head was not on a swivel. I was always singing to the radio. Didn't have a mobile phone, but I had a radio. And a friend of mine is actually my sister's brother-in-law got in a horrible, fatal accident. 5 people died. He didn't.
God.
And honest to God, he should have. He was in a nursing home for over 20 years completely immobile,
Wow, that's
and I paid attention after that. I was like, "Okay."
mhm,
Yeah, when that hits you right smack in your face where you live, you go, "I may need to pay better attention."
mhm.
It shouldn't have happened. I mean, it really none of that should have happened, but fortunately, I did pay attention and I did stop singing in the car at the top of my lungs, and my head is constantly on a swivel. It's not me that I don't trust, it's everybody around me.
Mhm. Yeah, and, so my husband is a professional driver, and he says, and it's true, and I've paid attention to this, 25% of people, or let me flip that, 75% of people will say that they're a better driver than everybody else. So, we know that that just can't be the case, right? And
Especially if
so
you've ever been in a car with them.
right, exactly. And so there's a lot of, kind of thoughts, like you said, until you unfortunately experience something like that, there's kind of, an egocentric, thought about how we drive, and we're looking around and we're saying, "Look at that person, what an idiot," or "I can't believe they're doing that," and then maybe a couple blocks later, we're doing the same thing and just not paying attention to what we're actually doing, so maybe we're about 75%.
What makes Jungle's curriculum different from traditional driver's ed programs? And I like what you said earlier about, I didn't realize it was an industry. If I thought about it at all, which honestly, I think I've indicated that I haven't, is that, you see these driver educations and you see the nervous teacher on one side of the car.
Mhm.
And that's about as far as I've ever gone with it. I didn't realize that it is turning into apparently a much needed industry.
Yeah, absolutely, and I just get so nerded out talking about it, and I because I'm so passionate about it and I see the potential that's out there, but, starting with Jungle in our curriculum, a lot of folks, when you think about driver's ed or you think about maybe an experience that you had at your public school, I think of the color beige. That is the best way I can describe it. A beige environment, kind of monotone instructor. Maybe it's the gym teacher or the history teacher that is
Right. It's
running a
always the
little
gym
late.
teacher or
Yes,
it's
yes,
always those 2 guys. The others are like, "Nope, not gonna do that."
exactly, and so people think about that, and I think that's just kind of what pops into everybody's head. So I think where driver's ed has focused for a very long time is teaching kids how to operate a vehicle. And there is some of that, don't get me wrong, but our component is we wanna teach kids to think. We wanna
Uh,
put them in real life situations and teach them
right.
how to think through that.
And that makes sense because we don't know what we don't know, and at 16,
Mm.
17, 18 years old, we're largely stupid. I don't care what anybody says, we may be book smart, I was, but I didn't know much about life,
Mhm.
and I think that you put a kid in a car that weighs several thousand pounds and tell him to hit the gas, oh my god. So they're not
Oh,
thinking,
yes.
they're just going, "Woohoo," and off they go.
Yes, and, it is scary, and, that is part of what I was mentioning before about making sure kids understand this is real. What you're doing here is real, is that we do phrase it exactly like that, like, you are basically in control of a weapon every time you get
Yep,
behind the wheel,
absolutely.
and it
Abs
needs to be that real for them.
How do you teach them to pay attention? I mean, what are some of the steps that y'all take when you're working with these kids? What do they really need to know? Let me rephrase that. What do they need to see?
Yes, I love how you phrase that because that's actually part of our curriculum. We teach them that it's about your surroundings. It's about what's ahead, not just right next to you. So a little kind of sneak peek into our curriculum. It's all jungle based and it's all jungle themed. So this has been designed specifically to have kids recall. We use a lot of things like mnemonics, a lot of acronyms. We use a lot of fun jungle animals when we're trying to teach them a concept. So a good example of that is when you're driving along and maybe there's a driveway next to you and there could be a car that's getting ready to pull out, And, we need to get the kids' attention and tell them that they need to be aware of that and why. Well, what we've done is we've taken that concept or we've taken that risk and we've assigned it to an animal uh, that they can easily recall. And that animal is a crocodile. So instead of saying, okay, driver or okay, student, we're coming up on a driveway. So we know that when we're coming up on a driveway, there's a potential that a car could just not be looking and blindly back out or drive out of the driveway and assume that you're going to yield to them. So instead of giving them, that was a long piece of instruction, right? What we can do is simply condense it to crocodile on the right. So we have taught them, okay, crocodile means this. So now they can recall that image of a crocodile, and the instructor can quickly instruct them that hazard ahead, and this is what the hazard looks like. So that's kind of a little taste on what we've done with the jungle theme to get kids to quickly turn around and understand the risk.
I like that, and I'm in Southwest Louisiana. We have alligators down here, and by the way, they're yummy. We do eat them. But, during and we have 6 months of hurricane season. It's gonna start up again in June. So where I live, we have 2 seasons, hot, hotter than hell, and hurricane
Yeah.
season. But we know that after a big storm like Katrina or Rita, which, I lived between both of them, and I got smacked by both of them. But it was not unusual, and it's still not unusual after a big storm event like that to find an alligator on your front porch. So, we our heads are on a swivel for things like that. So I like the crocodile analogy. I'm going to,
Mhm.
translate it as alligator though, just so you know.
That's okay. No, that's okay, and one of the fun ones that kids really love is the butt sniffer. So the butt sniffer is the tailgater. So,
Oh,
we w yeah. So we say, butt sniffer, or we tell them, "You don't wanna be a butt sniffer, right? So then how much space
no, it
do
just
you need
sounds
to give?"
ugly.
It does, it
It does.
does. I think the actual jungle animal that ties back to is the tapir. So if no one, has ever visited, like, a jungle at the zoo or whatever, or a jungle in real life and seen a tapir, look that up. It's an interesting animal.
I was gonna say monkey, but maybe not.
Well, so our monkeys are the gawkers. They're the ones you have to look out for in traffic that are maybe slowing down and staring at an accident or,
Oh.
yeah, just not paying attention, and so, those are dangerous animals on the road as well.
I can imagine, and, I would be waiting for one to jump out of a tree and get me. So, one thing that I see a lot, and they're very busy in their cars.
Mhm.
They don't have both hands on the steering. I watch this a lot because I'm always observing. I'm a big observer of life in general. And I'll see somebody putting on their makeup. We've all complained about that. We'll see them eating, unwrapping something from Taco Bell. Don't eat Taco Bell in your car. Just don't. But it's just, and the kids are hollering and grabbing, and it's not a rolling kitchen. It's just
Mhm.
not. But so many
Yeah.
people are treating it like that, and I think they don't understand the hazards that they're creating for themselves and the people around them. They're just doing their thing.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. And that's one thing, so you mentioned earlier, about distracted driving. So we have 6 jungle rules. One of them is jungle rule and never drive distracted. This is probably one I'm most passionate about because as you mentioned, car crashes may not be the leading cause of death for all people, but it certainly is for teens. And the reason for that is distracted driving and speeding. And
Mhm.
distracted driving, when I ask the kids, "Okay, what is distracted driving?" The first thing they say is phone. "It's my phone." Like, you're
Right.
absolutely right. However, what they don't realize, it includes all the things that you just mentioned. I mean, adjusting your radio, adjusting your temperature controls. Those all take your eyes off the wheel for 1, 2, or 3 seconds. And when kids think, "Oh, that doesn't matter," I'm like, "Do you play video games?" And they say, "Yes." And I'm like, "If you were to close your eyes for 2 seconds in a video game, would that matter?" And they say, "Yes." And I'm like, "Well, then how's driving any different?" So, one of our goals with our curriculum is just to like you said, I guess, expose them to everything that is included in a distraction. It could be outside of the car, it could be inside of the car, and, not eating, especially Taco Bell, because a little lettuce and cheese falls
Oh, that's
everywhere, and,
that's gonna land on
uh
your lap, and then you're gonna look down and hit somebody, so don't eat Taco Bell in
exactly.
the car.
Exactly, and we teach them early on, your phone goes in the console or in the glove box. If you absolutely need it for an emergency, you can pull over. Any personal items like your bag, excuse me, purse or anything like that goes behind the driver's seat. So we're opening their eyes to really how many distractions occur by the minute when you're driving, and really what the value of 1, 2, or 3 seconds really is, because it's all it takes.
I love that, and are they writing these distractions down? I mean, do you say, "Listen, the next time you go somewhere, I want you to write down as you remember it later, don't write it down while you're driving. Pull over and say, 'I did this, this happened.'" And once you
Mhm.
count those things up, you're like, "Holy cow." Listen, you talking about the phone, mine goes with me, but it's off. It's
Mm.
muted. I'm not gonna get a ring. I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to answer it. My radio is off because
Yes,
I'm listening to what my car is doing. I'm listening to the car roaring up behind me, so I go, "Oh, geez," and get out of their way.
right,
You have to listen, you have to look, and you have to pay attention.
right. And absolutely, I like to put them in an experiential environment. So there, even as something like, when it's really cold in Nebraska, which it doesn't sound like you experience that, Denise, but we do in Nebraska
Every
for
once in
sure.
a while.
So every
We have
once
an
in a
ice
while.
storm every once in a while, and that just kills everything. I mean, it will just take your yard and turn it over and say, "Well, we're done. Buy new
Oh, goodness,
plants." Yeah.
frustrating. We experience that quite a bit. So, every Nebraskan knows that when you are, when it's 20 or fewer degrees, it's not fun to get into a cold car. So what happens is we crank that defroster up high. Well, it's loud. It's really loud. To the point that you might not be able to hear the things outside of your vehicle. You might not be able to hear things like an emergency vehicle coming. So
Really?
yes, I mean, it can be that loud right up on the top of your dash trying to de-ice that windshield. So, I tell kids, like, you have to pay attention to every single thing that's happening in your environment. So, a lot of times what I'll do is get candy, and I'll say, "Okay, what's a distraction? There's no wrong answer here." And just to get the kids to engage, I'll throw different pieces of chocolate or something, for everything they say, and a lot of them are like, "Oh, I never thought of that." Like, I'll say a park bench, a sign outside of the car, "Oh, I never thought about that." So, it's good, and also I tell them to kind of snitch on their parents a little bit. I'm like, "What do your parents do? What have you noticed them doing that's really bad?" Some of them have said, "Oh, I'll notice them talking on the phone." That's probably the biggest thing that we hear. Or, "Oh, my mom eats all the time," or, "Oh, my my dad, drinks coffee, with and steers with the other hand," or, whatever the case might be. So they're starting to think of these things, like you said, Denise, and starting to go, "Oh my gosh, I guess that is a distraction." So, and then there are other parts too where I tell them, "Hey, on the way home tonight, whether you're the one driving or whether it's mom or dad or whoever, I want you to pay attention to these things." So I want them to see that we're not just saying this stuff in the classroom. We're not just standing up here, for our benefit. We're doing this for you, and we want you to pay attention on your way home and realize that these things do happen. And, as far as the parents are concerned, that's a big piece of what makes jungle work, or how we want to kind of shake up this industry, is with parent involvement. And, a big part of that is getting the parents to realize that they're learning from you from the moment they are old enough to understand what's going on. So they've been watching you for 14 years. They've been
They
watching
may
you
not
maybe.
listen, but they're watching.
Right? Exactly. So we tell them, like, "Hey, we need you to be a strong partner in this. Yes, we're teaching your child, but we also need you to set a good example. Are you a parrot that gets behind the wheel and talks on the cell phone? Are you a monkey who slows down and gawks at accidents and things like that?" So we get parents involved as soon as we can, and that's not something that you see across the industry. And as we're growing and getting into more and more states, I'm learning more and more about this industry and I'm learning more and more about driver's ed culture. And it is something that parents either want to be completely hands off. Here you go, you're the expert, take my kid, teach them the best. Or it's that parents believe that they know best. And I will say, as a parent, there are some times in life when that's true, but we trust experts to everything else in our child's life. And driving is one of the most important things your child is ever going to learn or do. And so parents are sometimes thinking that they're the expert. But what we're trying to get them to see is, you have 20, 30 years of preconceived notions and maybe bad habits that you're now going to turn around and teach your child. So that's where we're coming in as a partner for the good of the child.
And that leads me to my next question, which I think you actually just answered, was that are parents underestimating the risk that their teens face? And from what I'm hearing from you, they absolutely do for the most part.
Absolutely. Number one, I don't think that parents are quite aware of the statistics around teen crashes and teen deaths, unfortunately. Number two, I think that when there's something that we do every day, like driving, brushing our teeth, brushing our hair, taking a shower, I think we all kind of get complacent in what that really means. And I'm guilty of it myself, Denise. And so we say, well, this is just something my child has to do, just like everything else, right? They have to go to school, they have to brush their teeth, they have to do their homework. So I think there's a complacency that occurs when we're so good at it that maybe we think we're so good at it that maybe we forget the risk. Maybe we forget how scary it is. And as a parent, I have to say, like, the probably most heart-wrenching moment for me was after my daughter did get her driver's license and pulled out of the driveway by herself, and everything came crashing down, right? But what we wanna do is help parents kind of get out of that anxious feeling. Nothing's ever gonna take it fully away, right? It's your baby, but what we wanna do is get them to understand this there is risk and kind of painting that real picture for them just like we paint it for the children, and it's not to scare them, but to your point, it's to get them to see this isn't a complacent thing for them. It's a really big thing for them, and so let's partner. Let's make it better for them.
Now, is this only for kids? Because I have to tell you, this oddball story happened to me many years ago. I had a fairly serious illness, and I didn't drive for about 2 months, which was fine. I worked from home, but I didn't drive. And when I got into my car, I I wish I'd seen, a camera had been pointed at me because I probably looked like, oh hell. Now what? I could
Yeah.
not remember how to turn on anything in my car. I had to sit in the driveway, which is a very long driveway, tree lined, so that had its own set of issues, and say, "Oh my gosh," I had to reacquaint myself with my dashboard, how to drive. I mean, just 2 months, that's all I was I didn't move it, I turned it on to make sure the battery was still mo so I'm wondering for, adults who have not driven for a while, maybe they've had an illness, maybe they've been in the hospital, maybe their mama took their car away, who knows, but
Mhm.
is could this be for adults as well?
Oh, absolutely, and one of the most surprising revelations when we started our first school here in Omaha was just how many adults are calling asking for instruction.
Oh,
And I
good,
think
so it's not just me then.
it is not it is definitely not just you, and, we have folks that have called us, they have their driver's license, but like you said, maybe something happened. Maybe there was a traumatic event that they experienced, or like you said, maybe they just haven't been driving for quite some time, and they just want a few hours behind the wheel with a professional. So that is absolutely something, that the driver's ed space um is handling is, that the need of adults and what that comes with as well.
I'm glad to hear that because that again, that's not something you just say, "Well, I've had a driver's license since I was 16, 17, 18 years old. Why do I need to go back to
Mhm.
school?" But
Right?
things do change. The way the cars operate change, especially if you've got one that does everything but brew coffee for you.
Right.
Maybe you need to have another, little refresher course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I agree. And it is actually just, what we've seen anyway, from a business perspective, just a huge line of revenue. But additionally, beyond that, we're seeing more and more states raise the age limit um, or the age minimum, excuse me, for being a requirement to take driver's ed. So Ohio, for example, has just implemented a regulation that if you are under 21 years old and you've never had a driver's license, you have to take driver's ed,
Well,
which
that
I
makes
think is
sense. That's
yes,
brilliant.
I agree completely because just because you turn 18, doesn't all of a sudden mean that you don't need this type of instruction. I think the assumption comes that you're maybe more mature at that point, but again, it doesn't age does not replace the need for, critical thinking behind the wheel and teaching of a real skill. Oh, it's a tongue twister. So I'm glad to see that some states are actually putting regulations behind that.
Well, where are state systems falling short the most
Oh,
right now?
such a great question. I would say that it's not, not an un not a challenge that we can't overcome, we'll say that, but what is so striking, especially for jungle driving school, because we are, franchising on a national scale, so we're dealing with all different kinds of states. But what's happening is just the limited amount of resources at the state level. So there's not like one central place to go find information. A lot of times the DMV or Department of Transportation or Department of revenue, whatever governing entity owns driver's ed in that state, they'll have things on their website. They'll have statutes that are available and published, but there could be little nuances of things that maybe aren't clear in there that you find out through the application process. But really, overall, where I think they're falling short is that it just varies so greatly by state. And when I think about just the fact that someone in Ohio, where the standards are really high, a child is really learning a lot and they're getting a lot of instruction. But then you go to a state like Missouri where there's absolutely no requirement. You have two different kids of the same age learning a life skill, and there's a huge variance there. Well, the scary thing is people move,
Yeah, we
people move,
drive across the
people
country all the
People
time.
drive a car. Yes, and so I would love to see in the future, I would love to see this industry more regulated on a federal level so that everyone's learning the same thing. Maybe there's more resources put toward it, and I don't wanna get on a soapbox about this here, but this has just become something I'm very, very passionate about. We see, leading cause by hundreds of thousands, of course, there are things like cancer and heart disease, and those do kill a lot of people. But a lot of resources are also put toward those things, right? Just to help
Right.
people, to educate people. And the thing that's frustrating for me is that this is the number one killer of teens and it's preventable. This isn't something that, you die through something hereditary or, something like that. We can overcome the staggering amount of deaths caused by teens with education and with standardized education, and it can make a real impact. And anyone who's ever lost a child knows how devastating that is, and so I think where states are falling short is just maybe there's just some complacency, maybe there's some burnout. And I'll be honest with you, it is time for driver's ed to be revolutionized, and it is time for a newer generation to step in and kind of lead that revolution. And I know that that's a really strong word, but again, I think we just see so many folks that have been in it for so long that are just kind of complacent. And the one worst thing you can say to me, Denise, is that's the way it's always been.
It's always been that way. I hear
Well,
that. I
that's the
just
way it's
flinch. Right.
Yes, and I don't accept that in any part of my life, and so, this is just something that, uh, again, I'm trying to get involved with more organizations on a state and national level to say, "What can we do? How can we come together as a group that's passionate about this, that sees these lives destroyed from teen deaths, and how can we make this better?" It needs to happen.
I agree with you, and I'm not one for, the government telling me what to do, but everybody drives,
Exactly.
and they are aiming those cars at you, whether you do it or
Mhm.
not, one way or another. And this kinda goes back to what we were talking about with parents. Do they really understand the risk? And I don't know if this is even you have an answer for this, but are there statistics that show when teens are in an accident that results in fatalities, who's at fault? Is it somebody that,
Mhm.
hit them, damaged them, or did they do it? Are those statistics available?
They probably are on, a much more local level. So, generally speaking, like, when we look to organizations like National Highway of Transportation Administration, they are responsible for, a lot of the statistics that we see when it comes to over the road crashes and deaths, but it doesn't necessarily get granular enough to say it was because of this or it was this fault or whatever. I will tell you though that what we learn, is that crashes, and this number, I don't know if it'll shock you or not, car crashes are 99% preventable. So that means 1% of the time a car crash is occurring because there was absolutely no way to avoid it. So again, that goes back to education, and that's not something that I think parents realize. I don't think those numbers are something that parents realize. But when it comes to fault, um, for I guess the teen audience or what parents don't realize, I would say based on what I've read, for some states locally, for our state locally, it is the teenager's fault, or determined fault at the time would be because of that teenager. But that's not saying that that is 100% of the case, of course.
No, but I think that would be the assumption, the
Mhm.
automatic assumption. You're young, you're distracted, you're on your phone. So many reasons that, so many thoughts that you can apply to what is a horrific happening, and you can be
Mhm.
very judgmental. I mean, we can
Oh,
be
for
very
sure.
judgmental. Well, he was on his phone, his fault.
Yeah.
That may not have been the case, but I think that's going to be a lot of people just, "Oh, that is such a shame." Well, it's probably his own fault. I
Yeah.
hate that, but humans, we're not necessarily nice.
Yeah, you're right. And kids say all the time, when we talk about situations on the road, or we talk about if you do this, it could cause a crash, or if this person does this, it could cause a crash. They always, not always, they often ask, well, wouldn't it be that person's fault? Or "Well, that wouldn't be my fault, is it?" And I always stop them and say, you should not be worried about fault at this point, because fault only matters if you're alive. So, worry about the fault part later. Keep yourself alive, keep
Right.
keep
Pay
yourself
attention.
walking and talking. Right,
Yeah.
right. So, that is kind of one mindset they get into, and not to throw parents under the bus here, but, I'm one, and I feel like I can speak for the masses sometimes. They hear that, right? And I'm absolutely guilty of that, where I've been behind the wheel and, someone does something and I react to it and prevent a crash, thankfully, and I'm like, yeah, well, would have been your fault. You say something in anger at the moment because you're frustrated and upset that that situation happened. So again, kids start listening, at
Yeah,
a very early age. So, we need to get away from kind of fault and financial, implications of a car crash, or vehicle implications of a car crash, because sure, that stuff matters, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter a lick if you're not living, if you're not with us anymore.
exactly. Cheryl, was there
Mhm.
a moment when this work became personal for you?
Such a great question. I really consider myself very fortunate, Denise, that I have not experienced an auto related tragedy, but I think where it comes personal for me is just being a mom. And a lot of times when I'm giving kids road tests, I'll ask myself that question is, would I feel safe if this person was driving with my daughter? So it becomes personal to me that these people are going to be driving with my family on the road, and just thinking about the lives lost in our community. Omaha's a pretty big city, but also very community oriented city, and there's been some tragedies with teens. in the last year or so. And just thinking about their families and what they're going through every day just breaks my heart, just breaks it. And so it's personal to me, I would say, just on the level of being a mom, and another human being. But I am fortunate enough to say that I haven't been personally impacted by something that horrific.
Well, I'm happy for you because I have
Yeah.
more than once, and it
Mm,
changes you. It really
yeah.
does. Let's talk now about your business model because you are a
Mhm.
franchise,
We are,
which I
yes.
don't think people expect to hear, but you are a franchise. So let's talk about that and why it's it's a big industry. It's an important industry. So go. I'm going to
Right.
get out of your way and let
Oh,
you talk.
I would love to. So I always like to start at the very beginning of the story. So me and my incredible teammates that work on the franchisor side of things, we have all worked together in different franchising industries. And this opportunity came up, and our CEO, Zach Butler, reached out to all of us and said, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. Would you be interested?" Right. And so I remember him calling me and he's like, "Hey, you want to go have breakfast? I'm going to tell you about the next big thing." I'm like, "Sure, I'd love to." Well, I met up with them and he's like, "Okay, so it's driver's ed." And I was like,
What?
"Come on. This is a prank."
Well, when we did the
And
pre-interview, I did the same things. Like, "What?" Yeah.
exactly. And he was like, and so he started explaining it to me. And so we actually have a founding location in Grand Rapids, Michigan, owned and operated by Fred and Cheryl Westdale. And he was like, "Man, it's the coolest thing. It's all jungle themed." He was telling me a little bit about the curriculum. I'm like, "Wow, this does sound really cool." So I was like, "Yeah, I'm all in. Let's do it. I'd love to see how we can kind of revolutionize this industry." And then I went up to Grand Rapids with the team. We met the owners, we saw the school, and I felt in my body that this is where I'm supposed to be. And I felt in my heart that I was home. This is absolutely something I have to be part of. And the rest is just kind of grown and grown and grown. And I really feel like I said before, I have for the first time in my professional life, like really feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing for the world. So so we started there, right? We started with this great team that knows franchising, and then it's kind of like, okay, how do we take a driving school and franchise it? Well, it's really quite simple. In the fact that what we needed to do first was understand the industry, and we need to understand what parents are dealing with. We need to understand our customer, right? We need to understand the experience that kids are having. So that's the magic word there is experience. So in order to disrupt this industry and disrupt the expectations, we have to focus on an experience here. So back to my comment about what makes or what pops into people's head when they think driver's ed. And like I said, for me, it's always been the color
Beige.
beige.
Yeah, and I
Beige,
get that.
boring.
You never
Yes.
see a really cute driver's ed car going down the street. You just see a bunch of nervous you can almost smell the sweat. You
Yeah.
know, nervous sweat, but it's beige. You're so and I
Yeah.
started laughing when you said that, and now it's stuck in my head.
Yeah, and it's kind of cold and DMV and rules and all of this stuff and but what makes jungle so special is that we're providing a different experience for the kids. So you walk into one of our schools and it is jungle everywhere. Jungle animals, greenery, trees, because we want kids to immediately walk in and not feel intimidated, because when a kid walks into that environment and feels intimidated, that's all they're going to be thinking about for the first couple days. So we want them to immediately feel relaxed and intimidated. We or relaxed and ready to learn and not intimidated. So that is kind of piece one. And then when you combine the curriculum with that, and the curriculum's all jungle themed, it's like they're going on an adventure. So we're providing that experience for them. But it doesn't just stop with the kids, it continues with the community. So I have talked to a lot of state representatives, a lot of different driving schools across many different states. I have never, and I'm using that word. I know you're not supposed to say never and always, but I have never seen another school that is as active as in the community as Drunkle Driving School. And that's part of our mission. Our mission is to save lives one teen at a time. But we can't do that on our own. It takes a community, right? So we're out there in the community. We're attending farmers markets, we're attending basketball games at the schools, we're taking the cars and we're putting them in the parades. We're going to all these things so, number one, we can expand our business, and tell people about jungle driving school, but we're also doing things with organizations like MAD and the Scouts
Oh,
and things like
Mothers
that.
Against Drunk
Yes.
Driving. All right.
Yes, because we want to be a partner. We want to be a safety partner. So you'll not see other driving schools doing that. I'm not saying that they don't all, focus on their own little thing, but collectively, that kind of makes us powerful. And so when I say we want to disrupt the industry, as long as we are keep doing what we're doing on the local franchisee level, and making sure that every franchisee we bring in here is on board. Yeah, I want to disrupt. And they're passionate about being the mission and they're passionate about being in the community. As long as we do good on our part on bringing those people into the system and letting them do their thing in the state, we will disrupt and we will kind of turn this industry into a professional business. Now, I tread lightly there with those words because I don't want anyone listening thinking that there's not professionalism in driver's ed because there is. However, it's a very kind of gig based industry at the moment. So you'll see a lot of schools
Fragmented.
that, yes, it's
Definitely
very
fragmented.
fragmented.
Right.
So you'll see, a lot of, quote, mom and pop uh, companies that have been around for 20, 30 years, and that's fantastic. They're doing great as their business. But what we want to do is help folks to realize that there's a real opportunity here for a professional, viable big business. And it starts with, again, kind of bringing a new generation in and helping folks to see that, and it's not just about, strapping a student driver sticker, on your Ford Focus or whatever,
Your
sure there are people,
Nova.
you
I
know,
actually saw one that was a Nova. I didn't know they
oh
were
my
still
goodness,
around.
that
I
that's a
stopped. I stopped and just let my mouth hang open for a while. It was bad.
that's crazy. I haven't even heard that name in years, let alone
I
seen
know.
one of those
I actually
vehicles.
took a picture of it and went, "What kind of car is this?" And then I ran it through Google and went, "Nova? They're still alive?" Yeah,
That's impressive. That's impressive that someone's been able to keep that car, going that
and it was in
long.
good shape. It looked good.
Yeah, crazy. Well, good for them. But yeah, I mean, we want people to realize like there's a real opportunity for a future here, for a professional business. I mean, you see, different other franchised learning centers, that focus more on academia. But why not driving? It's so needed. It's a huge part of learning for the student. And, something that's really appealing to our future business owners that we talk to is that, this is something, it's not going away. This is
Yeah.
something that it's AI is not gonna replace this, at least not in my lifetime, and so that it really there really is, an opportunity for a big earning potential here. So, we want people who are mission focused, but also, want to kind of replace that 9 to 5 and do something that really gives them purpose and makes them money. So, um, Jungle has kind of figured out the industry and, figured out, just with standards and processes and kind of doing what we say when we say it's time to do it. And I don't, of course, mean that literally, but, just handing the blueprint over to our franchise owners and saying, do this at this certain amount or that this certain time and do your due diligence here and there and you will have a profitable business. And so it's exciting. I again feel just so lucky every day that I get to be part of it and that I get to spread the word, just not about our business and jungle driving school and what's in the future for us, but also what's in the future for the driver's ed industry as a whole.
Understood. Well, now I have to ask, who is the ideal franchise owner for this?
I always tell folks, think of like a Ted Lasso, right? Someone who, um, someone who just is really wants to be part of the community. So there are business owners that I have worked with in the past that, they kind of want to put their money toward an investment and kind of like brush their hands of it, let someone else take over and make their money. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But this business model is a little different. So there's eventually the opportunity to kind of, step back and watch your business grow. But we want someone who is passionate about making a difference in families' lives. So we want that person who maybe um, has been a coach or has been an educator. Now that's not required by any stretch of the imagination, but our ideal franchise owner is just really going to be passionate about this. And it's so fun working with our franchisees. We have about 27 of them now. And it's so fun working with them because they do things that literally brings tears to my eyes. And it's just like, man, were we lucky to find these people. But it's also people who maybe don't have experience with those things, have never been a coach or teacher or anything like that. But like you asked me before, have personally been impacted by, something driving related. So they want to get into this to make the problem smaller. Or there are folks whose kids have gone through driver's ed and realize how much is lacking, and they want to be the differentiator in their market.
I love that. So I have to ask you, what surprised you most when you entered this industry?
What surprised me most really is just how easy it would be to make a change, and how much opportunity is out there. I mean, there is just an immeasurable amount of opportunity to make this industry just bigger and better. And that was really surprising to me because, you just kind of think of, Jim's driving service who's been around for 20 years. Oh, well, they've got it handled. Well, not really, because what you don't stop and think about is, there's 14,000 kids in most average size cities. There's 14,000 kids, excuse me, every year turning age to drive. So it's just like, holy cow, there's a lot of opportunity in this space. But we don't want to just get in it, get kids their driver's license and make money off of these families. No, that's not our purpose. Our purpose is to change lives. So we see that, and it was surprising to me just where the numbers are and how much opportunity there really is.
And you said something earlier, and I was scribbling down because I wanted to ask a question or make an observation. I'm never sure what's going to come out my mouth. But you were talking about so many driving schools are it's like kind of and I'm putting words in your mouth, but kinda like walking back into your social studies class, if they even
Mm,
have those anymore. It's
mhm,
beige, it's dry, it's dull. All you wanna do is get your butt out of that hard chair that's hurting your back. And
mhm,
that's what I mean, I that's where I immediately went, it's like, "Oh, no, not this again."
mhm, yeah.
So the way you're describing, it's like, "Okay, that sounds like fun." You know, I wanna learn more about monkeys, things like that, what do I need to pay attention to? So I like what you're doing with just the sheer look and feel of it that is more exciting, and it probably makes
Mhm,
a lot more sense to people who are walking in going, "Oh, they're already
yeah.
interested."
Well, you know how teenagers can be, and teenagers a lot of times don't like to communicate with mom and dad. But I had a child just the other night. This was one of the coolest things that I have experienced. Um, I had a student the other night whose parent walked in and, kids, have to put on a certain front for their peers, right? And like, oh, this is so uncool, whatever. But their parent walked in and she's like, I'm so glad you're still here because we'll call him Billy. Billy kept talking about, how cool the school is inside, and I just haven't had a chance to go in and look at it. And he's just kind of standing there like, "Oh, geez," like,
"Oh,
"Oh, I can't
oh,
believe that."
don't talk, stop talking." Yeah.
And so, like, that made me feel really good though, because again, you might not get much out of them when they're sitting right in front of you in that chair, but it's clicking and it's sinking in the background, and that's all that matters, Denise. So obviously he's been going home and talking to parents and telling them, this and that and how cool it is and everything like that because mom came in and said, "Yeah, he was telling me how cool it is in here and I just wanted to come see it for myself." And I was like, "Wow, we're doing something right." And to me, that was just like kind of a full circle moment, from starting from day one of the build to having it come full circle with a student in class whose parents coming in to check everything out. It was like, this is cool. This is so cool.
Very nice. Ooh, we're running out of time. I've got one more question. Where do you see driver's education heading over the next 5 to 10 years?
Great question. There's only one place I can see it heading, and that is up. We have just more and more kids again coming of age to drive. More and more statistics that are being expediently brought to our attention just because of technology and cars and everything like that. I think that states are going to have to realize that we have to put more regulations behind this, and with more regulations comes more opportunities for folks in the education industry with driver's ed to provide more on the student level, which of course is music to our ears as a business. So I think we're only going up. We just have to be careful that we're doing it the right way, and we're not just creating driver's license factories. We're creating educational institutions that save lives.
Exactly, and I'm going to go back to something you just said and that I said earlier. Cars have changed. I was listening to a quick I think it was on Twitter, and this woman had bought a Tesla. She felt like she had to go back to school. She didn't know how to open it. She didn't know how to do anything in it. Yeah, and that kinda harkens back to when you get in your mom's old Cadillac or whatever she's
Right.
going to trust you with, and you're like, I've seen you do this, but I don't know how to do it."
Yeah, and that's a kind of a brilliant part of being part of a franchise organization is, that you rely on your franchisor to kind of look at the future and mitigate some things and create opportunities from those things, those changes that we see coming. And that's definitely one of them. Is that eventually we're going to have to integrate a lot of pieces of this technology in with our curriculum because right now you can very safely say there's still cars out there that work just like every other one, maybe push button start and maybe the emergency brakes right in the middle by the gear shift, but we're going to get to a point where it's going to be an important part of our curriculum. So that's another thing, kind of looking to the future that we're ready to be prepared for.
Oh, good. Cheryl, this has been such an important conversation and fascinating. Driver's education isn't something that most people think about till it's too late. I know I didn't. But what you shared today really highlights just how critical it all is, not just for individual drivers, teenagers, adults, but for entire communities. So,
Mhm.
from the lack of resources to keep the dangers of distracted driving to the opportunity for entrepreneurs to step in and create real change, what you're doing is work that truly matters. So, before I reluctantly let you go, where can our listeners go to learn more about Jungle Driving School, become a franchisor? I never can say that word. You know what I mean? Connect with you or explore franchise opportunities. Where can they reach you?
Yes, so I'd love for you to visit our website at jungledriving.com. I would love for you to visit me personally on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Cheryl Price. I would also encourage you to visit our LinkedIn page, which is Jungle Driving School. And, please shoot me a message. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd love to hear more about our program, I'd love to tell you more about our program. Or if you'd like to learn about any franchising opportunities, I can definitely connect you with the best franchising team there is.
Cheryl, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I didn't want to interrupt you as much as I did, but I was like, ooh, ooh, and my hand would go up like I was back in school. But it has been a fascinating conversation, and I thank you. And to the audience, today on Your Partner in Success Radio, I had the tremendous pleasure of talking with Cheryl Price. She is the Director of Training and Operations for Jungle Driving School. Go find that website. It's fascinating. Cheryl has a background in franchise operations and training across all kinds of industries, like senior care and home services. And now she is applying that experience to driver's education, which, as she noted, its mission to save lives. So we dug into what's really going on behind the scenes in driver's ed, why traffic related injuries and fatalities are on the rise. That makes my heart hurt. And the gaps in state resources that make it harder for business owners to thrive. And she also shared what makes Jungle Driving School's curriculum different, how entrepreneurship intersects with teen driver safety, and what it takes to build a system that actually works in the real world. Works in the real world. I can do it. A huge thank you to Cheryl for sharing her expertise and passion. And these are the conversations that make a difference. Find her at jungledriving.com and on LinkedIn. And I will see you next week for another episode featuring, at the end of the show, I can't talk no more. A guest who is making a real impact. Cheryl, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you for having me, Denise. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, it's an honor, and thank you.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.